The distress signal pierced through the void of space like a dying scream, carried on quantum frequencies that most civilizations had long abandoned as primitive. Captain Sarah Chen stared at the holographic display aboard the UES Meridian, watching the alien transmission repeat its desperate plea in broken, ancient galactic standard. The bridge crew exchanged glances. Communications Officer Rodriguez cleared his throat nervously. "Captain, the signal is coming from the quarantine zone. Sector 7-749 Alpha." Sarah's jaw tightened. Every spacefaring species knew about the quarantine zone. It was where the Kethmori had been banished 3 centuries ago, sealed away behind an impenetrable energy barrier that stretched across 12 star systems. The galactic community had deemed them too dangerous to exist among civilized races. "What's the nature of their distress?" Sarah asked, moving closer to the display. Rodriguez's fingers danced across his console. It's a medical emergency, Captain. Mass casualties. They're asking for immediate humanitarian aid." He paused, swallowing hard. "They're saying their children are dying." The bridge fell silent except for the gentle hum of the ship's systems. Sarah could feel the weight of a dozen pairs of eyes on her. Everyone knew the protocols. The Galactic Council had been clear. No contact with the Kethmori under any circumstances. They were quarantined for a reason. "Captain," Science Officer Dr. Patel spoke up from her station. "I'm reading massive energy signatures from within the zone. Something catastrophic has happened to their homeworld." Sarah walked to the viewport, gazing out at the distant shimmer of the quarantine barrier. Somewhere beyond that wall of energy, an entire species was crying out for help, and the galaxy was turning a deaf ear. "Ma'am," Rodriguez said quietly, "we're receiving secondary transmissions. The Kethmori have sent the same distress call to every major species in the sector. The Xantharian Empire, the Crystalline Confederacy, even the Void Dwellers." "Any responses?" "None, Captain. Radio silence across the board." Dr. Patel's console chirped urgently. "Captain, I'm detecting quantum decay signatures. Whatever's happening in there, it's accelerating. If my calculations are correct, they have maybe 72 hours before complete planetary ecosystem collapse." Sarah closed her eyes. Remembering her grandfather's stories about the first time humans had encountered the Kethmori. Before the quarantine, before the fear, they had been explorers and philosophers, known throughout the galaxy for their advanced medical knowledge and peaceful nature. But that was before the incident that had turned them into galactic pariahs overnight. "Captain," her first officer, Commander James Park, approached cautiously. "The Galactic Council's directives are clear. Any species that aids the Kethmori will face immediate sanctions and potential expulsion from the Federation." "I know the directives, Commander." Sarah's voice was steady, but her mind was racing. She thought about the oath she'd taken when she'd first donned the uniform of the United Earth Space Force, to protect and serve all sentient life, regardless of species or creed. The distress signal played again, and this time, Sarah listened more carefully to the translation. Among the technical specifications and coordinates, she heard something that made her blood run cold. The voice speaking was young, barely more than a child by any species standards. "Dr. Patel, what exactly are we looking at in terms of the disaster?" The science officer pulled up a 3-dimensional model of the Kethmori homeworld. "From what I can determine through our long-range sensors, it appears to be a cascade failure of their planetary defense grid. The same energy barrier technology that keeps them quarantined also protects their world from cosmic radiation. Something has caused critical systems to overload. And if it fails completely? Total atmospheric ionization within hours. Everything on the planet dies." Sarah stared at the display, watching the energy readings fluctuate wildly. Millions of lives hung in the balance, and the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy were content to let them perish rather than risk association with the quarantined species. "Captain," Communications Officer Rodriguez called out, "we're receiving a new transmission. This one's different." The bridge speakers crackled to life, and this time the voice was clearer, speaking in accented but understandable English. "This is Elder Vexhai of the HFY Science Collective. We know that our people are not welcome among the stars, but we beg of any who hear this. Our children are innocent of the crimes our ancestors committed. If there is any compassion left in this galaxy, please help us save them." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in heavy silence. Sarah could see the conflict playing out on every face around her. They all knew the stories, the warnings about what the HFY had done centuries ago. But they also knew that condemning an entire species to extinction went against everything humanity claimed to stand for. "Ma'am," Park said quietly, "if we even approach the barrier, it will be detected. Earth Command will have our heads." Sarah nodded slowly, then turned to face her crew. "Dr. Patel, how long would it take to reach the barrier's edge?" "At maximum warp, 18 hours. "And how long to develop a method for breaching the quarantine field?" Dr. Patel's eyes widened. "Captain, I can't recommend—" "How long, Doctor?" "Theoretically, if we adapted our shield harmonics and worked with their frequency patterns. Maybe 6 hours once we're in position." Sarah looked around the bridge one more time, seeing the mix of fear and determination in her crew's faces. "I want to make something clear to all of you. What I'm about to do goes against direct orders from the Galactic Council. Anyone who wants to register an official objection can do so now, and it will be noted in the ship's log." No one moved. No one spoke. "Helm, set course for the quarantine zone. Maximum warp." As the UES Meridian leaped to faster-than-light speed, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that humanity was about to cross a line from which there would be no return. The galaxy had made its choice regarding the HFY long ago. Now, humanity would make theirs. The distress signal continued to broadcast across the void, a lonely cry for help that only one species was willing to answer. In her quarters that night, Sarah reviewed everything known about the HFY, trying to understand what had made them so feared that even the threat of extinction wasn't enough to move the galactic community to action. What she found in the classified files made her question everything she thought she knew about the quarantine, and why humanity might be the only species brave enough, or foolish enough, to risk everything for compassion. The Meridian raced through the darkness toward an uncertain fate, carrying with it the hopes of one species and the defiance of another. Behind them, automated monitoring stations began transmitting warnings to Earth Command and the Galactic Council. Humanity was about to shatter 3 centuries of carefully maintained isolation. And somewhere in the depths of space, other species watched and waited to see whether humanity's legendary compassion would prove to be their greatest strength or their ultimate downfall. The UES Meridian dropped out of warp at the edge of the quarantine zone, and Captain Sarah Chen felt her breath catch in her throat. The barrier stretched before them like a wall of living lightning, crackling with energy patterns that hurt to look at directly. It was beautiful and terrifying, a monument to the galaxy's determination to keep the HFY isolated. "Sensors are going crazy, Captain," Dr. Patel reported, her voice tight with concentration. "The energy readings from inside the barrier are off the charts. Whatever's happening to their homeworld, it's accelerating faster than I predicted." Sarah studied the tactical display. "How much time do we have?" "Maybe 40 hours before complete ecosystem collapse. But Captain—" Dr. Patel hesitated. "There's something else. I'm detecting massive gravitational distortions near their star. If those energy cascades reach the stellar core, we're not just looking at planetary extinction. Their sun could go supernova." The bridge crew exchanged alarmed glances. A supernova in this region would destroy dozens of inhabited systems, quarantine or no quarantine. Why isn't the Galactic Council responding to this? Commander Park demanded. Surely they must know. Because, came a new voice from the communication array, they believe it is preferable to let us die rather than risk our condition spreading. Every human on the bridge froze. The voice had come from their own speakers, which should have been impossible. The quarantine barrier was designed to prevent any form of communication or passage. "Who is this?" Sarah asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I am Elder Vexahai. I apologize for the intrusion, but our scientists detected your approach. Your ship's quantum signature is unlike anything we have encountered. You are human, yes?" Sarah exchanged a look with her communications officer, who was frantically checking his equipment. Rodriguez shook his head. The transmission was somehow coming through their shields, through the barrier itself. "Yes, we are human. I am Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth Space Force. Elder Vexhai, how are you communicating with us?" "A technological adaptation born of desperation, Captain Chen. We have been studying the barrier for 3 centuries, learning its patterns. We can briefly manipulate its frequencies, though at great cost to our remaining power reserves." Dr. Patel was scanning furiously. "Captain, I'm reading massive power drains from multiple locations within the barrier. They're burning through their entire energy infrastructure just to talk to us." "Elder Vexhai," Sarah said, "preserve your power. We're going to find a way through the barrier." "That is generous of you, Captain. But you must understand what you risk. Your species is young in the galactic community. To aid us would mean your exile, just as we were exiled." "What exactly did your people do that made the galaxy so afraid of you?" There was a long pause before Vexhai responded, and when he did, his voice carried the weight of centuries of regret. "We tried to save them all." Before Sarah could ask for clarification, her tactical officer called out urgently, "Captain, we have incoming ships. Multiple contacts dropping out of warp." The view screen shifted to show a massive Xantharian dreadnought decloaking directly ahead of them, its weapons powered and targeting the Meridian. Flanking it were sleek, crystalline Confederacy cruisers, their hulls shimmering like living gemstones. "This is Admiral Zethkri of the Xantharian Empire," a harsh voice crackled over the comm. "Human vessel, you are in violation of Galactic Decree 2847. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." Sarah stood slowly, her mind racing. "Admiral, we are responding to a distress call." "Surely the right to render humanitarian aid supersedes—" "There are no humanitarian considerations where the Kethmori are concerned," Admiral Zethkri interrupted. "They are quarantined for the safety of all galactic civilization. We will not permit their release." From her science station, Dr. Patel whispered urgently, "Captain, I'm reading weapons charging on all 3 ships. They're preparing to fire." Sarah felt the weight of command pressing down on her shoulders. 3 advanced warships against 1 exploration vessel. The odds were impossible, but beyond the barrier, millions of innocent beings were dying, and apparently, the galaxy's greatest fear was that someone might actually save them. "Admiral," Sarah said, "what if I told you that the disaster inside the barrier could trigger a stellar collapse? A supernova that would destroy everything in a 50-light-year radius? Then we would evacuate the threatened systems and rebuild elsewhere. The quarantine must be maintained." Sarah closed her eyes, thinking of her grandfather's stories about the early days of human space exploration, when Earth's ships were tiny and primitive compared to the galactic powers. But humans had always had one advantage. They were too stubborn to give up. "Elder Vexhai," she called out, hoping the Kethmori could still hear her. "You said your people tried to save them all. Save them from what?" The response came weakly, the power drain clearly taking its toll. "The plague of ages, Captain. A quantum virus that would have consumed every sentient mind in the galaxy. We found the cure, but at a terrible cost." Our people became carriers of something far worse than death. We became carriers of absolute empathy. Dr. Patel's head snapped up from her console. Captain, I'm detecting strange quantum fluctuations around the barrier. It's almost like... Like what, Doctor? Like the barrier isn't just keeping them in. It's keeping something else out. Admiral Zethkree's voice boomed across the comm channel again. Human vessel, you have 30 seconds to withdraw. This is your final warning. Sarah looked around her bridge, seeing the determination in her crew's faces. They had come this far. They had heard the desperate pleas of a dying people. And now they were learning that perhaps the quarantine wasn't about punishment. It was about fear of something far more complex. Admiral, Sarah said, her voice calm and steady. Respectfully, no. The word hung in space between the ships like a challenge. Behind them, the barrier pulsed and crackled, and somewhere beyond it, an entire species waited to see if compassion could triumph over fear. Dr. Patel, Sarah ordered, begin working on a way through that barrier. Commander Park, all power to shields. Rodriguez, open a channel to Earth Command. Captain, Rodriguez said, Earth Command is 14 hours away at quantum communication speed. Then send this message. The UES Meridian is about to engage in a humanitarian mission that may result in humanity's expulsion from the Galactic Federation. We do this not in defiance of Earth's values, but in affirmation of them. As the Xantharian dreadnought's weapons reached full charge, Sarah realized that humanity was about to discover whether their reputation for stubborn compassion was accurate, or whether they were simply naive newcomers about to learn a harsh lesson about galactic politics. The answer would determine not just the fate of the Keth Mori, but the future of humanity's place among the stars. All hands, Sarah announced ship-wide, prepare for combat. And remember, we're not fighting for territory or resources. We're fighting for the right to help those in need. That's what makes us human. The first energy bolts lanced through space toward the Meridian, and humanity's greatest test began. The UES Meridian shuddered under the impact of alien weapons fire, her shields flaring brilliant white against the darkness. Captain Sarah Chen gripped her command chair as her ship bucked and rolled. Outgunned, but not outmatched in determination. Shields down to 60%, reported Lieutenant Torres from the tactical station. But Captain, something strange is happening to their weapons. Each shot is getting weaker. Sarah frowned, studying the tactical display. The Xantharian dreadnought and its crystalline escorts were indeed firing with decreasing intensity, their energy signatures fluctuating wildly. Dr. Patel, what are you reading? Captain, this is impossible. The quantum barrier isn't just containing the Keth Mori. It's affecting the attacking ship's weapons systems. The closer they get, the less effective their technology becomes. Elder Vexhi's voice crackled weakly through their communications again. Captain Chen, you must understand. The quarantine was not designed merely to imprison us. It prevents our condition from spreading, but it also protects us from those who would destroy us out of fear. What condition? Sarah demanded, even as she ordered evasive maneuvers. When we cured the plague of ages, we absorbed its quantum properties into our neural pathways. We became capable of perfect empathy, feeling the emotions and thoughts of all sentient beings around us. At first, it seemed like a gift. Perfect understanding, perfect communication, perfect peace. Admiral Zethkree's voice cut through the channel, filled with rage. Lies! You infected entire star systems with your mental contamination. We tried to help, Vexhi continued, his mental exhaustion evident even through the transmission. When we first left our world after the cure, we encountered the Xanthari Civil War. Millions dying over territorial disputes. We thought we could end the fighting by sharing our empathy, by making them feel each other's pain. Dr. Patel gasped from her station. Captain, I'm beginning to understand. Perfect empathy in a species not adapted for it would be devastating. Imagine feeling every emotion of every being around you simultaneously. with no way to filter it out. It drove entire populations insane, Admiral Zethkri snarled. Billions died from neural overload. The Crystalline Confederacy lost 3 entire colonies before you were contained. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. But surely there must be a way to control it, to help rather than harm. We have spent 3 centuries learning to do just that, Vexhai replied. Our young are born with natural mental barriers. They can share empathy without forcing it upon others. But the galaxy fears what we were, not what we have become. The Meridian shook again as another volley struck their shields. But Sarah noticed that the enemy fire was becoming increasingly erratic. Their ships were getting closer to the barrier, and their crews were beginning to experience what every Kethmori had learned to live with, the emotional resonance of every living thing around them. All ships, withdraw to safe distance, Admiral Zethkri ordered his fleet, clearly recognizing the danger. Dr. Patel, Sarah called, can you break through the barrier? Almost there, Captain, but there's something else. The gravitational distortions near the Kethmori star aren't natural. They're artificially generated. By whom? Elder Vexhai's voice grew urgent. Captain, you must listen carefully. The disaster threatening our world is not an accident. Someone has sabotaged our planetary defenses from the outside. Someone who believes that our extinction will finally end the threat we represent. Sarah's blood ran cold. Admiral Zethkri, are you monitoring this conversation? There was a long pause before the Zentharian admiral responded. The Galactic Council determined that the Kethmori represent an ongoing threat to galactic stability. Certain measures were deemed necessary. You're committing genocide, Sarah shouted. We are preventing a greater catastrophe. The Kethmori must never again be allowed to spread their influence beyond the barrier. Dr. Patel's console lit up with alarm signals. Captain, the gravitational weapon is reaching critical resonance. When it destabilizes the star, the explosion will be channeled directly through subspace. It won't just destroy this system, it'll create a chain reaction that could destabilize half the galactic core. That's impossible, Admiral Zethkri protested, but there was uncertainty in his voice. Not impossible, Elder Vexhai said sadly. We tried to warn the Council months ago. The weapon they deployed was based on our own technology, reverse-engineered from captured data. But they did not understand the quantum mechanics involved. In their haste to ensure our destruction, they have created something that will consume countless innocent worlds. Sarah made the hardest decision of her career. All hands, prepare for emergency barrier penetration. Dr. Patel, punch us through on my mark. Captain, Commander Park protested. If we enter that field, we'll be affected by their empathic resonance. Our crew could be compromised. Then we'll deal with that when it happens. We're not going to stand by and watch genocide, even if it means risking our sanity. The Meridian surged forward, its modified shields creating a temporary gap in the quarantine barrier. As they passed through, every human on board gasped as a wave of overwhelming emotion washed over them. Not just their own feelings, but the desperate hope, crushing fear, and profound gratitude of millions of Kethmori minds. Sarah fought to maintain focus as alien thoughts and emotions flooded her consciousness. Around her, she could feel her crew struggling with the same invasion of sensation, but gradually, she realized something remarkable was happening. Instead of being driven insane by the empathic overflow, her crew was adapting, learning to filter and process the emotional input. Captain, Dr. Patel called out, her voice strained but determined, I can feel their scientific knowledge. They're sharing everything they know about the gravitational weapon. I think we can stop it. Through the chaotic swirl of shared consciousness, Sarah felt something she had never experienced before. The absolute certainty of being completely understood. The Kethmori weren't trying to control or manipulate her thoughts. They were simply allowing her to feel what they felt, to understand what they understood. All ships, she broadcast on all frequencies. This is Captain Chen. I am now in direct mental contact with HFY scientists. The gravitational weapon must be stopped immediately, or it will destroy half the galaxy. We need everyone's help. What followed was the most unlikely alliance in galactic history. Xantharian engineers worked alongside crystalline technicians and human scientists, all guided by the shared knowledge of HFY minds. Through the empathic link, language barriers dissolved, cultural misunderstandings evaporated, and ancient prejudices were set aside in favor of survival. Admiral Zethkri himself led the effort to disable the gravitational weapon. His mind opened for the first time to the genuine remorse and desperate desire for peace that filled every HFY consciousness. When the weapon was finally neutralized, he wept. Not from neural overload, but from understanding the magnitude of what his people had almost done. In the aftermath, as rescue ships from a dozen species poured through the now open barrier to help with disaster relief, Sarah stood on the bridge of her ship and marveled at what had been accomplished. The galaxy would never be the same. "Captain," Elder Vexhi's voice came through their communications, clearer now that they were within the barrier. "Your species is remarkable. Most minds that encounter our empathic field either shut down from overload or become consumed by it. But humans seem to naturally adapt and find balance." "Maybe," Sarah replied. "It's because we've always been a little crazy to begin with." She could feel the elder's amusement ripple through the empathic link, shared by countless other HFY minds. The Galactic Council would spend the next decade debating the implications of humanity's actions. Some species called for Earth's expulsion from the Federation. Others praised humanity's courage, but gradually, as more races experienced controlled exposure to HFY empathy under human guidance, a new understanding began to emerge. The HFY were not the threat the galaxy had feared. They were teachers, offering a gift that had been misunderstood and feared for too long. And humanity, with their stubborn refusal to abandon those in need and their natural ability to balance empathy with individual identity, had become the bridge between two very different ways of experiencing consciousness. Years later, when historians wrote about the day the galaxy learned that compassion could overcome fear, they would call it the beginning of the true age of understanding. But Sarah Chen, promoted to admiral and now serving as humanity's first empathic liaison, preferred to think of it as the day when being human finally meant something beyond just surviving in a hostile universe. The day when humanity proved that sometimes offering aid to those the galaxy has abandoned is not just the right thing to do, it's the thing that saves everyone.